This meeting to order, 4:02. Assembly Bill 2449, direct request for remote attendance, if any. Do we have any?
We don't have any requests.
Do we have any public comments?
Nobody out there.
Okay, move on to item 4, assignment of interim duties, associated compensation.
So, started the process with our class and comp study, and we're kind of working through sort of succession planning and where we want to go, overall. And we have some roles that are really essential as we move forward. And rather than fill those roles on a permanent basis, I think it's appropriate to fill them on a temporary basis and let the class and comp study go to fruition and go through all the dialogue, and then make an appropriate sort of determination at the end. It's typical to have sort of, positions filled on an acting or an interim role while you go through a process. So we have a little presentation. Yeah.
Well, actually, hold on.
First slide. So, kind of talk about where we are now and where we need to be. The class and comp study goals and objectives. First is really to update our org chart. And part of that is, and I think it's an important step, is evaluate our current positions. What do we have today? Who's in those positions? What are those positions? What do the job descriptions say? Then do some future planning and evaluate the needs for staff positions in the future. And the next piece down is really the important one, is adjust the positions to the actual need. While we're doing all this, we need to address our changing regulatory environment. The EPA has just adopted for water districts, water supply, a maximum limit on PFAS.
Saw that. Brand
So,
new.
Brand new. And it's 4 parts per trillion.
That's on water agencies,
It's
not
on water
on
agencies.
sanitary districts.
Right, but at the same time, they're going to turn around and because a lot of our discharge goes into the natural environment and percolates down into the ground, they're going to turn around and come up with a limit on us. There's probably some testing that goes on first. What limits? Where are you? But these are the kinds of things that come from the EPA and the state. They continually are looking at the chemicals that are being used in the consumer products and so forth. So we'll then, on the class and comp study, we'll update all our job descriptions and classifications and demonstrate a path for advancement and build for the future. Next slide. Currently, we have authorized 21 full-time equivalents. We have 1 current FTE open. That's the collection system supervisor. We recently hired a operator 3 in the collection system and filled it as an operator 3 rather than a senior collection system operator.
That's a lower grade.
It's a lower grade. And this is part of the process, is sort of going through the analytical, what do we need? Who do we have? What roles do they fit? We have a bunch of eager, wonderful people who are eager to learn, but they may not have all the skills to fill a senior collection system operator. And so part of our long-term goal is to train them and provide them mentoring and the knowledge to be able to assume those roles in its full entirety. But at the current time, we filled it at a collection system operator 3. So then, next slide, navigating the current short-term staffing. So we would recommend that these appointments are only interim while we do the study. It's typical to ask people if they want the opportunity, and we have some people that have expressed an interest in moving up overall in the organization and being a part of the future of the organization. So these would be interim appointments. We've ensured that all critical work is getting done. Nothing's not getting done. We're not incurring additional overtime now or into this new scenario with these temporary positions. Most of the additional work is being filled in with supervisors. Rick, myself, Allison, Yan have all taken on some additional roles to make sure that things happen and are completed. And then, I think more importantly, we're going to fill the positions based on what we need in the future, not what we currently have. Next slide. So we've had 5 retirements over the past 5 years. They range from 19 years to over 40 years. Some positions have changed. Some aren't relevant today that they were when the person was hired. And we don't need the person in the exact job description that they did. And when you have somebody here's 40 years, you span a huge regulatory time frame. That's 2.5 plant upgrades.
We measure it.
It's beyond the last one. It's beyond the one before the last one. And so what we really need to do is make sure that we're not filling positions that we used to have and need. We're filling positions and training our employees to fill the new positions and the new challenges that are ahead of us, not the ones in the rearview mirror. Some of the current descriptions describe what we don't need today. And I don't think it makes sense to fill a position because we have an opening based on a job description that applies to something that used to be necessary and isn't so much necessary going forward. The tricky part is if you fill a position based on an old job description and you have the person doing some different tasks, they're working out of their classification. And in the public environment, working out of your classification is a regulatory problem. That's a labor law issue. You tell someone to do something and it's not in their job description and they weren't hired with that as a mandatory or minimum qualification for the job. We talk about MQs all the time. It's like, what are the MQs for the job? And if you hire somebody to do something and then you have them doing something over here and there weren't MQs that your job description and they weren't hired to do those MQs, you have issues. Future planning for retirement. It would be wise for us to not be naive to think that we're not going to have retirements in the near future. There's at least 5, there could be up to 8. The question at the time is, do we just fill them from the outside at the time of retirement based on the new job description? Or do we plan for a retirement based on the people we have and get them ready to assume those roles and those responsibilities and be in charge of those now changing job descriptions? There is a huge value in local knowledge. Somebody who's been here, knows the system, knows where all the things are. I can tell you last night, we started getting rain at 11 yesterday, and last night things got dicey. And people did what they needed to do, went right to where the problem was, went right to a solution, knew what to do, knew who to and how to solve it, and fixed the problem. So we had a pretty challenging evening. Somebody went right to the shop, got the check valve weights, went out and swapped out the check valve weights on a pump station so we could boost the flow in the pump station. Somebody else was working on another lift station. Treatment plant crews worked through the night. And so here we are today. We're right at the limit of what we can do. We were running 11 MGD earlier today. We're now down to 7.1.
Building Lake Palmer.
Oh, it's full. Yep. It's quite the serene look. Duck blinds and all right now. But everybody knows what to do.
Where?
And where to go. When we had our spills, we had long-term relationships and called people, said, I got a problem, come meet me at 7 o'clock in the morning. And people showed up, vendors, consultants, contractors showed up because they knew us, they worked with us, they had relationships with us, and all the pieces started coming together. Right now, Montecito has some political challenges on their board. Got merger questions with the water district and they're having issues. They've got some sewer problems. Well, they can't find any consultants to do the work with them. So they're calling us and asking us for recommendations on who they should call, and we give them names and they say, oh, we already called them and they declined coming and working for us. So these people, these relationships, these long-standing pieces of knowledge are huge. People are our most valuable resource by a long shot. So we're not opposed to filling from the outside. But my first recommendation would be train people to fill from the inside and maintain those core pieces. If you don't have the people that can meet the MQs that you need to do the work that the district needs, well, then we've got a new job description that's got MQs that accurately predict what we need, and we can go out to the world and say, we need to recruit, and these are the minimum qualifications we need for this position. So we can decide whether we have someone internal, which would be great. If we don't, well, now we have a methodology to go out from the outside and bring someone in and fill that position to the best needs of the district.
Isn't it fair to say, if you really think there's going to be 5 people the next 5 years, you have to hire from the outside? I should go from 8 operators to 3 operators.
Yeah,
You got to hire from the outside.
we'll hire from the outside, but I'm going to hire at a lower level, and the people that are here.
But you have to hire from the outside.
Yeah.
Train them to fill the better
Yes.
jobs and backfill from the
There
outside.
is a core of valuable people here, and they're eager and they're ready to really start doing more. I wouldn't let them go with a free rein. I wouldn't give them a short leash and then a longer leash and then a longer leash. I mean, this is a very methodical process. We've been talking about succession planning here, staff and staff meetings and pizza lunches and safety for a couple of years. So it's no surprise that we're going through this process and that there's some opportunities. And to their credit, they're looking at it and saying, show me what to do.
Let me in, coach.
And they're patient. They're not, give me the whole thing and I'll just do it. They're wise in their young age to know that they're not totally ready, but they really want to see what we do. They want to see how things go, and they want to learn how to do things. So we're not opposed to hiring someone from the outside at any level. But the first goal would be to fill core foundational jobs from inside and train the people to do them. And if by chance we can't, now we have a job description and an org chart and an MQ, so we can ascertain, if we get 2 or 3 applicants, who is the best fit for that job.
If you can't fill it from inside, everybody inside understands why.
And all
That's
these,
just as
and
important.
all these are going to be, all these new jobs are going to be internal recruitments. Just because you've been here 10 years or 19 years, you don't get the senior such and such job. They're based upon needs of the district, the minimum qualifications, the best fit for the organization. I would love to fill them from the inside, but I'm not going to just appoint people because you've been here 10 years and you get a promotion. I've been in organizations where that just breeds all kinds of problems. You promote somebody who isn't qualified to be promoted, who isn't respected, who doesn't have the skills to do some of the other things that come with that job. But now you've promoted somebody into the position. And it's a constant push to say, you're not meeting the accountability standards of that job. And so we're not going to do that. We're going to say, here's what the district needs. Here's the positions we need. Here's why we need them. Here's the MQs that go with it. Here's the job description. Would you like to apply? And if somebody applies and say, I'll do it, we're going to look at them and say, you're not ready. Or 2 people apply, we're going to pick the most qualified to do that position because that's the right thing to do in the long term. Next slide. Oh, I didn't spell something right. Considerations. Supposed to be an N in there. So first and foremost, even through these disasters, one of our goals and objectives is the continuation of business. No matter what's happening here, water needs to flow, but business needs to work. So from somebody coming into the counter to a phone call, to an email, to an emergency response, the continuation of business is first and foremost for the district. We got a changing regulatory and environment. When I came here 12 years ago, we didn't have a nutrient TMDL. We didn't have pretreatment. We didn't have to go visit dentists and have them verify what they're doing with their mercury. A whole host of things that we didn't have to do just 10 years ago. The projects are more complicated. We had a phone call with FEMA yesterday, and we go through the paperwork process, and the FEMA guy on the phone says, "Okay, I've got so and so here from the environmental side of FEMA. Tell us what your project was and tell us what you did." Well, we're able to say we contacted all these regulatory agencies. They've all signed off on it, and we have a correspondence and communication that says we did everything right and they're happy with the job. He says, "Fine, I'm done." But knowing to go in that you need to look for red-legged frogs and steelhead and nymphs and NOAA and fish and wildlife, fish and game, and the whole 9 yards, those are the regulatory environments that you have to know going in. You got to deal with audits. You got to deal with Brown Act, legal issues, government practices. We can look around this valley and have all kinds of conversations about bond managers and bond ratings and Brown Act violations. And I never want to stand in front of any of you and be there.
Again last night.
We're not going to go there and have problems over district attorney sending us letters that we're not complying with the Brown Act. So the world's gotten more complex. Our job descriptions and our MQs need to say that. And if our employees are in a position to and want to step up, then we have to train them to be able to meet those standards and meet those objectives if they've never done that before. And you don't learn it by just reading a book. You learn it because you see some projects, we talk about it, we detail what we're doing, you send them to seminars on things, and they build their knowledge and experience that way. Not something that happens, go to an environmental permit class and 2 days you know everything. So these are all the considerations that are going into the sort of process. My recommendation is we take these 4 individuals and 2 on a collection or 2 on a treatment plant side and put them in lead roles. We put 1 in the collection system in a lead role, and we take Bradshaw, who's a very detailed kind of guy, and have him take on some of the administrative duties that are very detailed and regulatory for both departments. Rather than having 2 people, 1 in each department, we now have an opportunity to combine some of those into a single point of contact and put these guys in these roles for an interim basis while we go through, the organizational chart and the forward-looking succession planning kind of process. And I think they're ready for it. It's going to take Rick and myself, Allison, to continue to have, a short leash.
That brings a constant challenge.
But these are 4 hard-charging, employees that are ready and able and willing to start taking that next step. And this is one piece of it is saying we're going to ask you do more. And, we'll see where it goes based on the new job descriptions, and then we'll classify them into the appropriate position at that time. But acknowledge today that they're doing more in a lead role than they were 6 months ago.
So these are, you're proposing these to be temporary raises until classification is completed and new assignments are made.
And then we'll make a decision, even for these four. It'll be what it is. We're gonna put together an org chart and job descriptions that, like I said on a couple of slides ago, that are what we need in the future, not what we had years ago. We have some people in some positions, and they're wonderful people and they do wonderful work. The job description kind of says, use Rick as an example, not him.
Cover your ears.
Ooh,
This is Rick's job description. It describes Rick. It doesn't describe the job necessarily in its entirety that the district needs and why the district needs it. It says, here's what Rick does. Now, he does a whole breadth of stuff, but the job description is sort of like Rick. It doesn't say engineering manager or needs these things. And there's no senior engineering manager or deputy engineering manager. There's no distinction between a couple of steps down and a couple of steps up. And when we hire somebody and they come in, we say, well, you're in our engineering manager ladder, but you're here, not here, and not here. And so you start here.
say why?
And you say, here's the skills you have, and here's the abilities and knowledge you have, and the minimum qualifications. And if you want to get to a 2, 3, or a 4, well, these are the additional skills that you have to demonstrate that you have the ability to complete. We're not going to promote you just because you've been here 5 years and you get to this one, this one, this one. It's based on specific qualification criteria. But if we just have one, and Rick leaves and we hire somebody else and they come in and they're not Rick, but they're in the same close, we don't have any ability to say, well, you're kind of 92.6% of Rick, and so we need this range of descriptions that allow for us to competitively fill the level of the applicants. You would hope that if we advertise for a engineer manager 1, that anybody who applies meets those minimum qualifications. That's not necessarily true. So if you don't meet the minimums, you don't get an interview. But if you meet the minimums and there's 2 or 3 or 4 candidates that meet the minimums, what's the distinction between the 2 or 3 or 4 candidates? And how do we articulate those so we can say, well, we hired this person, not that person? I've had in my career, people didn't get the job and come in and say, why didn't I get the job? And we have to be able to say, as a government, in the private side, you say, well, I liked him better. Not quite in so many words, but in the public side, we have to mathematically articulate, here's the minimum qualifications, here's the 3 candidates, here's how the 3 candidates fit into those minimum qualifications and exceeded them in this case or doubled them in this case. And we picked this person because he had this, not only met them, exceeded this person, but also had this other sub skill. You have to be able to articulate those. And those are the tricky situations. I've even had in my public career, some guy who didn't get the job, he met the minimum qualifications, but he wasn't the number 1 preferred candidate. And his wife called me and screamed at me. And so that hasn't happened here, but we need to be very careful when we hire people. We define what we need. We accurately measure them against those minimum qualifications. And then we hire based upon the most qualified candidate with the best fit. And we can articulate why. And so the measuring sticks we have today are those job descriptions in that org chart from yesterday. Some of those were filled by people who are 19 and 40 years in a position. We need to upgrade those, hence the need for the class and comp study. And that's where we'll end up. These 4 positions are to help us get there on an interim basis.
Jeff? Lots of questions as I sometimes do, but going back to your slides on hearing outside it seems like if we have retirements, obviously somebody that's very experienced. And so, it's nice to move people that have the next most experience into those slots, but it leaves a gap at the bottom. When I was looking at this whole issue of certifications, the wastewater certifications, what some agencies are doing, to my great astonishment, is I forget which, it was someplace in South LA, but they were hiring people to come in and work for a year for free so that they get their 1 year's experience so they could then take the Cert 1 test and be hired as a permanent employee. I was just astonished that they would get away with that, have anybody.
Wouldn't
But
let
what
them in
they
the
were doing,
plant. Yeah.
what they were doing was taking kids out of college because some local city college had a program for wastewater certifications. So these kids that are doing this on a 1 or 2 year basis till they finish, perhaps take these jobs because it would be in effect part-time. They didn't have to work full-time. So they could get their year's worth of credit before they could take that test. Just struck me that that was undespicable. I know it's a great advantage, but they ought to be paying them for showing up.
Engineering training or engineering
So-
intern
But
or.
what I was thinking about us, you've got things going on with studying all that, but I wonder if this district should consider the idea of hiring a 22nd person, a brand new operator that's right out of school, that doesn't have a year, he's got 3 weeks out of school kind of guy, just with the idea of building towards the future. The problem I see with that is, while I think it's good for the individual, there's no guarantee that guy will stay here. And so you potentially invested a lot of time and effort. in
Somebody else's minor league.
that decides he wants to go work at Montecito.
There's other problems with that too. Because in a small organization, when you hire somebody that's an OIT, an operator in training, somebody has to train them. And that takes time away from your person that's a doer. Now your doer is doing 3/4 do and 25% training the OIT. Second problem that comes into that is when it comes to standby and on-call, the state has requirements in terms of primary on-call and standby. So if you're an OIT, a 1 or a 2 at the treatment plant, when you're on call, if you're capable of taking the on-call duty, a 3 or above has to be in standby with you, available by phone. So a 2 takes up time. You got to pay 2 people now because you pay the 2 to be on call and standby, and then you pay the 3 to be on call and standby. And it really starts to grind on your ability to schedule because the 3s are always covering the OITs, the 1s and the 2s. And the same thing happens on the collection system. It's not necessarily a straight certification issue, but somebody who's a 1 or a 2 doesn't know all the little tricks. And so if we get a call from the fire department about a spill in a manhole, normally how it happens, somebody at the fire department calls us or one of the water districts. That's the other reason of having local people around town, because all these guys know each other. And they all live here in town and they're all driving around town and they're driving down the road and they see water coming out of a manhole, just sticking up just a little bit like this. And they don't call in our on-call 911 after hours number. They call somebody's direct cell because they've got it and say, hey, Travis, you got a situation on this corner. Well, an experienced operator, a 3, 4, or 5, or somebody who's been with the district 10 years, he probably has been in that manhole a couple of times and he knows probably what the problem is before he even comes in and gets the gap vacs and goes out there and pulls up at the right location and punches a hole through the plug. And so the OIT is great if you're the city of LA and you got 500 operators in the field and you can train 2 or 3 or 5. For us, it kills us. Because it takes away from the full-time doers and it takes so long to get there that you're covering for them on call.
So here's You brought up with the lily pad. The way it works now, we know in 5 years, we're gonna have to fill 5 positions from outside.
Right.
So the only people we can get under our current philosophy are experienced people from other local districts. We're raiding the lily pad. So I'm wondering if maybe it's too much for High Valley to hire a EIT, because of the things you say. Maybe it would be worthwhile for, I'll just say Ventura County districts to get together and create an OIT program, because in the end, we're just stealing from each other,
Well,
which makes no sense to me.
well,
We've got to have a training program for these people to come in.
you know, um, it's a small profession.
6,000 statewide.
I came into this county as a young engineer, and cold interviewed for a job with the city of Santa Paula right out of college. And I never cold interviewed for another job my entire career. I always knew somebody always knew me. I didn't get a favor, but somebody said, hey, why don't you come in and talk to us? Every time. One time it was a completely cold interview. It's the same thing in this industry. You know what? This is why I talk about character and culture of this organization and why I protect it religiously. Because at the end of the day, somebody that wants to come here is going to come here because we're a great place to work and we're great people, and they can have a good career here. They can be some opportunity, some knowledge, some nice people to work with, and that's going to be the difference between somebody coming here and going somewhere else. And everybody talks, and everybody knows which organizations are grease fires around the county, and who wants to get out, and who would get out in a heartbeat. And I'm not going to go cherry pick, but if we have an opportunity, I'm going to say, hey, we got an opening, anybody interested? And
What you just did.
and I have no problem doing that, because you know what? We're not stealing. I'm not going and offering them more money. Everything's even, Steven. In a lot of cases, people take pay cuts to come here because of the soft things. And so I'm going to protect that religiously, to say to people, we're not going to pay you the most, but you're going to come here and we're great to work with. We'll develop a relationship and trust and a working environment where you enjoy coming to work. You go home and you say, I had a great day at the job. And today was hell because I had to come in at 2 and work all day, but they're going to do it. And so I have no problem in an environment saying, here we are, come see us.
How does a group of 7 districts, let's just say, that have all of their employees are going to retire in 30 years? Where are the new people coming in?
Well, it's like
We're not bringing any new
well,
ones.
it's just like any other business, and it's one of the social and demographic and generational changes going on in our industry. There's the gray wave, the silver wave, the pick your acronym.
Airwave.
No hair wave. People retiring that have been in a business for a long time. And quite frankly, there's not enough A+ players to go fill all the positions for all the retirees. And so good places get them, and some places don't get anybody, and some places have a hard time filling a position and keep them open. We can go on any list and find a number of local agencies that have had the same positions open for a number of months. One of the agencies just reached out personally to us and said, hey, we're having a problem filling this position. Can you recommend a good recruiter, because we can't find somebody? So now we're going to go hire a recruiter to find somebody. Well, problem isn't the job or the pay. It's the place. And so, you know what? I'm going to work really hard, make sure we're a great place. And
Well, I understand that. I think my question is more something that, isn't there some overall organization for districts that needs to address how we're training people?
No,
USDA,
You know, there are industry agencies out there, and some of them offer training programs. But there's not enough to go around. And, there's not enough lawyers to go around. There's not enough emergency room doctors to go around. There's not enough, lots of things to go around. There's not enough bus drivers, and there's not enough teachers to go around. It's a fact of our economy and our society that are these openings. And we can all sit around and say, let's go train them, and then they'll go to City of Oxnard. Or we can say, let's be a great organization, and they'll come here.
Most of those organizations that have those training programs, they'll invest in training and they're required to essentially commit themselves for 2 years of post-training employment. And it hits the very next day after 2 years and they are out. It does not actually credit to any retention whatsoever.
The general question, or for my question is, we're not interested in creating an EIT program.
No. And we don't have the time. Takes away from us.
But I was kind of wondering, and there's no interest in doing kind of a.
Now, I will tell you, side tangent, there's a really good guy at Ventura College who runs a water science program. And he and Bradshaw are like this. And we have told him, and Bradshaw has told him, that you want to do field trips, you want to do information, you want to come see real world hands-on anytime. Open invitation. Good guy, solid program. Just happens it's at Ventura College because he teaches there. It could be anywhere. But so we're more than happy to let people come in, hang around. We'll give them tours. We'll talk to them about real world stuff.
builds the brand.
Well, I've taken enough time on that. I've got some other questions unless you guys. When I read the whole write-up, to me, it was real vague. So I'm happy you went through this because it helps me understand a bit more. But as you know, I've got a big issue with cost and expenses. And I looked at the I'll Pay website, 2021 data. Lita was the second highest of all the sanitary districts in 2 counties, 106,000 average per person for profit benefits. We were first at 150,000. This year we're at 180,000. I don't know what the others are. So that background makes me very loath to add any more burden or salary until we've done these studies. So I'm looking forward to seeing those done. So that's just a comment. But beyond that, there was what I was concerned about when I was a young man and actually had hair, my 30s, the company I worked for and several like us, losing their 15-year experienced people, about 10% a year going to other agencies, other companies. I always looked at that as a good thing because one, it was job security for me because I was in that demographic. And second, when the new people came in to hire experienced people in, they had to pay a premium because they're trying to take them from somebody else that pays pretty well. And so the rest of us always got a raise after they did that. And they always hired in groups. It wasn't just onesie twosies. So what I was somewhat concerned about is that, given that we just hired in an experienced person, that we were trying to make up salaries to others because we brought somebody in at a higher pay scale than our existing employees. But you didn't do that.
No,
That's not what happened.
no. When someone comes,
That cleared that issue for me. So it wasn't.
we actually downgraded the position. It went from a senior operator to an operator 3. And the operator 3 is an established rate. We don't say, what's it going to take to come here? We say, here's what our 3 is. And a couple of people who've come here recently have taken pay cuts to come here. And so
That cleared that issue for me because it was just something that crossed my mind, but I wasn't. But I've seen it happen before. So the other thing I had really understand is, we put the budget together, say last year and finalized it in September or something, I think we voted on it. You know, at that time on,
June, May and June.
well,
It usually gets adopted in June, May, June to go in effect on July 1.
was we had an org chart at that time that had 8 operators on it, including one of which was the senior operator system. As of a month ago, we still have 8 operators. So we went through the whole description of all these additional job requirements or duties or whatever. We had 8, we have 8. What actually changed? Why do we feel, for instance, we didn't have 3 lead operators, which now we're suggesting we should have 3 lead operators.
The lead operator is a temporary position. We
I
had 8 operators, and in each one of the 2 organization or groups, there was a senior operator. We've gotten rid of both those senior operators and filled them at a lower level.
That's the part I didn't understand. You say you've gotten rid of 2 senior operators?
Those 5 that have retired, 2 were senior
On
operators.
the org chart in September, we only had 1 senior operator.
What we're talking about, the 5, in our organization, we had 2 groups of 4. Each one had a senior operator in it. We didn't fill them at senior operator level. We filled them at a lower level. We had in charge of each one of those groups, we had a supervisor. One of those positions is the position that's still open. We're asking Bradshaw, who managed the treatment plan, to take over both in terms of an administrative role. So we're always going to do, from an operational standpoint, what we need to do to meet our obligations. And we didn't fill 2 senior positions, and we're combining, in a temporary basis, the 2 supervisors. And then we're going to go through the process of the org chart and all the job descriptions and say, what do we need? And I'm a fan of working managers. There's times when you just got to grind out paperwork and lick the stamp. We all know those things. There's all parts of our jobs. Some of them do more or less than others. I'm a big fan of everybody doing whatever it takes to get the organization running. And if that means, and I'm included, if I got to pick up a shovel, I'll pick up a shovel. That's just the way, if today I got to pick up a shovel, I'm picking up a shovel. And I expect the same thing of everybody who works here, that they don't sit back and say, well, I'm the chief deputy in charge of diddly squat, so I don't have to do that. And the problem is if the job description and the minimum qualifications allow for a loosey-goosey kind of obligation, then they can say, well, I'm just doing what my job description says. And I want job descriptions that say your first and primary role is to assist and manage and make the system work. These other duties, paperwork, budget, CIP, staff reports, evaluations, all kinds, they are also duties, but the primary role is to get and move the district forward. So we have to take this whole binder full of job descriptions and tweak them so we can say, you're a working manager. You're not to sit on your chair, manager, on a hot day and lick stamps because it's too hot to go out in the field and pull a shovel. That's not what I expect.
Okay, so we understand the senior operator is
Well, we got a job description that goes through it. And you know what?
versus a lead operator.
Well, the lead operator,
From 2 senior operators to now, no senior operators, but 3 leads, what you're proposing.
Correct.
And so what I'm struggling with is a lead operator an official designation that comes with it as would normally be a promotion and a raise?
no, this is temporary only.
Not, the temporary doesn't,
This is only because we have operational needs and lead roles that we need somebody to fill. Now, I can keep the 4 guys in each side and go hire another supervisor to do some of those roles. Or I can say to the 4 guys in each group, hey, you guys want to start stepping up and learning how to do some of this stuff on a temporary basis? We'll evaluate your ability to step up and do some of these things as we develop in a parallel path the job descriptions and the new classifications and qualifications. And at the end of the day, in 6 or 8 months, when we're done with that, and we've come up with something that is what the district needs, and you'd like to put your hat in the ring, apply for that, if you meet those minimum qualifications for that new job, we'll be happy to evaluate them. But if you don't, you can drop right back down to your current position and lose the lead temporary sort of title.
Still, why we go from 2 seniors to 3 leads, that still don't understand
Because we have four,
exactly is being.
because we have 3 guys that are all doing things that are necessary for the district.
Everybody is.
4 positions that are being filled by 3.
But
All 8 of
also,
them are doing that.
Mark was in last year's budget and he's not here anymore.
Right, we're not filling Mark's job.
That's the one, the supervisor that retired in November, right? And I understand him, that's why.
But each of these guys has taken some of that work,
That's correct.
what it looks like to me.
This is like basically,
Now doing part of your job?
No, they're doing part of Mark's job.
they're doing part of Mark's job and a little bit of Tom's job.
So this is kind of the way I envisioned this when I looked at this. So Mark was collection systems. He went away, so now you've got Bradshaw taking on part of his responsibilities. So you have another operator move in to help Bradshaw, so they fill that gap. While Bradshaw's gone, filling this gap with the collection system, got the 2 treatment plant operators moving up to take care of some of his responsibilities. That was just the way I looked at
That's
it.
exactly correct. Carl and Riley stepping into some of the roles that Bradshaw is going to let go of.
Because
While
he's doing Mark's job.
He's taking Mark's job.
That now starts to make sense to me.
And we have Israel in the collection system, who's taking on some of Tom's senior position and some of Mark's supervisor position technical roles, but he's not ready to completely grab a hold of all of them, and he's not ready to completely grab a hold of some of the administrative staff. So Bradshaw's moving over to pick up some of the administrative roles and some of the oversight, like safety. Rather than having 2 people do safety, have one that's combined for both groups. And then have Carl and Riley take on some operational roles in decision-making and some filling out the monthly reports that necessary to go to the regional board from Bradshaw within his shadow. And at the same time, Israel takes on some of the roles that Tom was doing at the senior level and some of the roles that Mark was doing. So we're kind of moving about 3 or 4 pieces all around with some of the younger, less experienced Carl, Riley, Israel taking on some of those roles in the shadow within the leash of being able to do it and learn how to do it. Rather than, hey, Mark's gone, you get to do the whole thing. You take on some, and some of us sit there and say, okay, show us what you're doing. No, let me show you how to do that more efficiently. Some of those kinds.
Makes more sense to me than the description I saw in the write-up, but given that they're now doing stuff that somebody above them was doing, what's happening to the stuff down here that they're not doing?
They're doing that too. That's part of
That with no overtime, like on your slide.
because they're working harder, because they want to assume some of these roles. That's why they're doing more. That's why there's a interim, partial pay increase to do more work.
Were you saying they were slacking before and now they suddenly have time to do
You
all
know,
this?
Lowell, it's not an even sum game.
Take that as a joke. I'm just,
You know,
it just doesn't make sense to me. You see why.
every employee listens to what we say here. And what we're saying here is we've got good quality people who can do more and are eager to learn how to do more. And the people below them are growing and learning and doing more.
No, I've got.
Brandon's below those other guys and he's doing more. And so there's always a,
They have the 12 hours in a day, so if they're doing more than
Some
something
of them
else.
have
isn't
9 or
doing.
10.
Well, but we're saying no overtime. That's what his slide said.
if you take the position that if somebody has to let go of one thing to do one thing, I don't think that's a true understanding of the efficiencies of learning how to do things faster and better. You know, we all learn how to do things.
It's really happening, yeah.
That is what's happening. It is what's happening. We have people that are learning how to be faster and better and more efficient at doing things. And they take on some roles when somebody else can let go so they can go. And maybe the new hire someday when we're done with all this isn't Mark's position, but a new 3. And everybody's moved up. Everybody's learned how to do things. We've done an analysis of how everything fits together and what's the best needs of the district. And it's not to fill Mark's job. It's to fill this job because that's what the district needs.
Now you'll have a both sides supervisor for certain parts of the duty.
Right.
And others fill in.
You know,
I understand the logic. I'm still stuck on the 8 hours, but, and part of the reason is.
there's a thing called productivity too.
Well, we had a situation where I worked and I know how hard I was working. I know how hard the other engineers were working. And the supervisors was given a presentation on some stuff they were doing. And somebody asked, well, what are you doing about this stuff over here? And he says, while we're doing this, we're not doing that. So it was a wonderful comment.
It's not an even sum game.
But if they're actually becoming more efficient, that kind of goes to the old adage that, you know, you lose one 40-year-old veteran or 40-year veteran, you have to have 2 people replace him.
Well,
That's what you're saying.
no, there's lots of little things. So when we do a lining project out in town, we're doing a water intrusion, root intrusion sort of work effort. So when we go back to do cleaning and videotaping, it doesn't take as long because the inside of the pipe is smooth like glass and we don't have roots coming in everywhere. Well, the old CCTV maybe took an hour to do a segment. Now we can do it in 50 minutes. And so it's these efficiencies and using technology to be able to do things in a more productive way. Otherwise, for all these regulatory things, every time somebody gave us a new regulatory requirement, I got to come back to you and say, now I got to hire somebody to go do mercury inspections at dentists. Nope. Now I got to hire somebody to do grease trap inspections at restaurants. Nope. Now I got to hire somebody to do da, 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 da. No, that's not the way we're going to do it. We're going to say, how do we efficiently manage all this smoothly and effortlessly so we don't go from 20 employees to 40 because the state gave us 20 more things to do.
Well, that helps tremendously because when I read it, like someone who figured it out, I assumed that you were going to take all the supervisory responsibility and you were going to be a busy guy at home late at night instead of coming home when you normally do. But what you've just described is very different than that. It is that, you know, some of that load is being shifted throughout the organization. And so that helps me. So, but it brings me, one of my other questions was, how did you choose these particular people? Because it wasn't something you bid out. You just picked ones that you thought were most ready to do this kind of thing, which is probably how you normally promote people.
You know, it's
Does
what
it create any animosity, I guess, within the group when you pick these 3 guys, they get a 10% raise, and these remaining 4 don't get a 10% raise, and yet they presumably are doing a little bit more too. So
well,
how does that work? You see what I'm asking?
no, and therein lies the art of managing your human resources. You know,
I think that is an argument.
and every time we interview somebody, every time I meet somebody in public who's in our industry, my mind goes to where are they? What are they doing? How do they do their job? Do they fit here? I read a book by Jack Welch. And he said, if you're a senior manager, he says, you need to have a list of 3 people that can fill every position in your next tier down. Not that they've applied or they would apply, but that you in your mind have figured out how to figure out who's going to go fill these positions. That's the way I go through my day. I'm looking at everybody I meet in every other organization and saying, are they a potential future candidate? And should I make an effort to sort of reach out to them and sort of, you know them personally, professionally along the way? And that's the art of personnel management. And, you know, yeah, it's an art form to take an organization and pluck someone out of the pond and say, you get to be the guy, the lady. Well, but that's just creating headaches for yourself. You need to mentor that person so that by the time you pick that person out, everybody looks around and says,
Right, guy.
he's the right guy.
Choice, yeah.
So
And that's-
it's not random and it's not arbitrary and it's not sort of seemingly without some sort of plan or methodology.
But see, what concerned me about this, you know, when talking my question, of how did you choose these three? Along the lines of you were talking about earlier, about all the things you have to do as we're public, is what you can do when you're private. For instance, looking three guys to do some project, you know, there's no public issues around that in a private firm, but here, you know, that's why I was wondering, the rules of a public organization, whether you have to post those jobs as
No.
opposed to just choosing the ones you want.
Um,
Because on the face of it, could be deemed just favoritism,
Sure, could be very true.
you know, but like you
Anybody,
said,
and anybody could challenge any of these decisions.
you're not thinking that's gonna happen.
It's not going to happen. And
So that's good.
it's not even going to be considered. And furthermore, there's a little bit of gray area grace by the acting in the interim kinds of titles.
Yeah.
Because it's not a formal recruitment and a long-term job description. It's for this time period. If we come up with new job descriptions, these people are going to have to apply for them. And it's not, and it's based on their qualifications. And if we interview everybody in the organization and everybody applies and nobody meets the minimum qualifications and is the best fit for the organization after the internal recruitment, then we go to the outside. And everybody internally, they may be upset, but at least they can come in and we can say, here's the minimum qualifications. Here's the skills you don't have. You ought to work on these skills and be in line for the next time there's an opening like this. And we don't even let it get to that point because as we're talking to our employees on a daily basis, reviews and other things, where are you going? What do you want to do? Are you interested in this? Are you interested in that? Would you like to check this out? Would you like to go do this? Would you like to get some experience, learning this other skill? Hey, there's a seminar on how to do pre-treatment inspections. Would you like to go to the class? On and on and on. This is a nonstop thing that it's not like, oh, there's an opening. Somebody retired. Anybody want to fill the position? This is not anything of that at all. This is us literally talking about talent management. If not weekly, sometimes daily, every day.
How did you choose the 10%?
There is a little bit of art in that too. It is a reasonable figure in my opinion, based on where they are in their job descriptions, but it is not an exact number that ties to a specific other permanent job. Because if I said,
Calculation.
it's not a calculation to say, you're here and we're going to give you the equivalent of a 4. Because then the assessment is qualified for a 4. No, we're going to say in this interim period while you're taking on these duties under the shadow of the organization and the structure, we're going to pay you more because you're doing more and you're taking on more responsibility. But when the permanent job comes out, it may only be an 8% raise if they're qualified for it. It may be 9, maybe 12, but
Or 3 if you're like me.
or 3. But you know what? Those jobs will be defined correctly and classified correctly, and then a salary will be appropriately assigned to those based on the comp study after a discussion with the entire board. Then we'll say, would anybody like to, we need 2 of these permanent sorts of positions. Who would like to apply? Maybe one of them does. One of them's like, you know what? I don't want to do this other stuff. I'm glad I helped you out, but and it's not me. I don't know. Both of them say, yeah, ready to go. We're not going to
So
predetermine those sorts of outcomes. All we're going to say is Today, we have an interim acting opportunity. District needs somebody to help us do. We're going to teach you, we'll help mentor you. We're going to go through a process. That's the right process for the district.
Well, in light of what you just said, it strikes me, I've learned a lot, so I appreciate it, and I'm sorry for you guys' time, but what in general was that, to me, in reading the description, it was very clear line supervisor position, definite, doing more, obviously doing more, deserve to raise some amount. It's not clear to me that operators are at the extra work they're doing are at the same increase as the supervisor.
Well, I think,
So, if it were me right now, would reduce the pay increase for the operators and increase the pay increase for the supervisor, just because I think it's obvious he's doing more. But you know your business far better than I do.
and I'm going to make some very,
It's 10% on a lower base too.
Huh?
Right.
Oh, yeah, I understand that too, which gets to a whole nother issue that I'll talk
a couple of
about.
things I'm gonna do specifically if this goes through is I'm not gonna go to Bradshaw with a question about operations at the plant or the collection system.
You'll go to one of those
I'll
guys.
go to those guys and say, hey, why are you adjusting this pump flow?
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Not to pepper them, but to get them used to answering the questions and having the knowledge to say, here's how I did and why I did what I did. Right now, they just go, Bradshaw told me to turn the pump on. No, they're pretty smart. They know why they turned it on. I'm being a little facetious here.
Just make it a point, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna make it a defined effort to say, what's going on with that pump? I walked by it and it sounded a growling. And if they go, I don't know, then I'm gonna say, part of your job and my expectation is you have a general sense of what's going on. If you told me you walked by the pump and it was growling and you think it needs an oil change and you said it's scheduled for tomorrow, I'd say, great. And that's all part of this process of being able to answer any question that comes at them.
Okay, I can buy all that now. So now these are technical questions for the pay. Are these increases going to be affected by cost of living adjustments? Second question, we intending them to be benefits bearing, these incremental pays?
No, it's not a COLA basis because it's an interim appointment and we don't have any COLAs.
No, but if we do a cost of living adjustment,
We'll have that conversation when that comes forward.
that.
When it's benefit based,
Curious about, but
when it's benefit, if you have the question about benefits based, the answer is correct. Yes. Anything we pay people there is a base pay by law. Benefits are based on that base pay. So for instance, if we pay them $10 an hour more, then time and a half is $15 an hour more overtime.
I just wondered how that was gonna work, so I understand that. So where I am on this, I was not willing to go along with this when I walked in here, except in the case of the supervisor, at least in total. I understand it much better now. I appreciate the time. So the only last thing is we say interim temporary, but I'd like to put a date on that. I'm suggesting November 1st, but I don't know what time our schedule is for this study to be.
I wouldn't put a date on it because if we put somebody in the role and we haven't completed the class and comp study for whatever reason, now we're taking people out of roles for jobs that the district needs to have completed. And so I don't want to put them in something and say, no, you're going back to the 3 because now they need to continue to do that job.
That study is supposed to be done.
We've already started the kickoff meeting. We've said, 4 to 6 months.
6 months, so that would be, what is it? By April 1st, so it's.
April 1st would be October 1st.
November.
But
I kind of think we don't need to tie the staff's hands with something like that. To
Well,
where
it's
they-
tying, it's
to where
tying
they-
our hands to get the study done. That's
To
what I'm
where they
trying to do.
force, to where we're forcing them to try and to push something through. I wouldn't be in favor of putting a closing date on it. You know, I have trust that we've selected a firm that'll complete this and we've got a staff that'll take care of it. And I don't think it'll go on for some years.
And
I
the
think it'll
board,
be time.
and the board will have the final say on the class and comp study anyway. Till we
Well,
do that, these people are all gonna be in these temporary jobs.
Kind of a solution.
This hasn't been-
Even
I think so.
And just as kind of a caveat, Lowell, in the time that I've been here, this is the first time we've done something like this.
Well, here's what I go back to, you know, like I said, when I looked at those, the job description, at least in the org chart in September, none of these lead roles were in there. And we didn't have two senior supervisors, we had one. So now we're taking away one senior supervisor, we're adding three leads. So, but beyond that, there's this whole issue of, when I look at the public pay data, fully 50,000 a year more per employee on average for districts. And so we continue, all of our decisions over the years have made sense. Now, we're on to the point where, you know, I hope the study explains that. I really want to know why our numbers are so vastly higher than
I don't think,
other groups. And so that's why I was fussing about the, you know, 10% versus 5%, you know, that, I had no way to approach this problem other than those kind of things, but
I think it's a little bit misleading to look at an agency as a whole and look at the average salaries as a whole. When you look at each of our,
we pay versus how much.
no, but when you take the whole organization, you say this organization pays this per average, that doesn't take into account every individual position. When we've done this survey before, we go position by position, compare this position to this position. And in almost every case, we're on par with those other positions. The last time we did this, we found that a number of our positions were low. And I would contend today, we're going to do this study, not across the board, but we're going to find a couple of key sorts of skills and skill set positions that are going to be off because other agencies are having a hard time filling, you know, the position.
I don't disagree with that, partly because, you know, we may have an older staff. Our pays could be much higher just because their average worker experience is 10 years and ours is 25.
Oh, but we don't go by that. We don't go by that. If you're a,
Scale does.
yeah, but no,
By grade and by step.
I know, but if
So
you,
the steps, you know, as you gain experience, as you get your next certification, you become an operator 2, you become a 3, you become a 4, become a 5. You know, our older staff is going to be more likely to have those higher.
I don't see that.
positions, and
I
so
don't see-
I
I
higher.
don't see that. I really don't see that in our organization.
Actually, the
If
opposite for us.
if that's not the case, then we even have a bigger problem as to why there's such a
Well,
difference.
you're taking the average of an organization as a whole, and that's not a clear comparison between apples to apples. If you look at a treatment plant 3 here, and you look at a treatment plant 3 in Ventura and Oxnard, you're going to find that they're very, very close, and we're probably a little bit low. And
If that's the case, then why is there such an overall difference?
I want to caution sort of comparing that data a little bit as the person who provides the data when they request it. People only provide what they ask them to provide, and it's in a predetermined template that they send out, those organizations. And I will tell you what can be interpreted or misinterpreted by the sort of titles of those columns and what to sort of allocate to those in dollars is pretty big. I think that we, as an agency, knowing that that's a transparency request, are probably more apt to complete it as thorough as possible to account for every compensation dollar, knowing that that's the intent of those. I would say that you can oversimplify that and exclude a lot of other benefits that lower that amount comparatively. It is very hard to complete those and sort of interpret what it is that they're asking once you get beyond base salary. And they ask for benefits. Like what somebody defines as a benefit could be very different from one agency to another. Is it all fringe benefits? Is it just health benefits? Is it some people will only put the amount that they contribute versus the entire? I mean, it can be vastly different from one
each of
ordinance.
those
I
districts-
caution you on using that as a true comparable, because what is truly
There-
reportable can be vastly different and interpreted different.
Are there accounting standards that when somebody reports comp and benefits,
No,
their annual budget,
no.
what we put on our comp and benefits isn't, I can see where we would have other benefits, but it seems like there's a list of things that you have to
I
go.
will tell you, to go on that website and say, number of employees, average cost per employee is nowhere near to a actual compensation study analysis. Not even close.
Actually,
But
if
the
you
numbers
just
are
cut
still the
off
numbers.
all the lower
$50,000,
lower
$50,000 higher than.
That doesn't exist. I will tell you, we don't pay $50,000 a person more. I will guarantee you,
We do.
we don't.
We just looked at our comp and benefits that we put in our budget. It's $180,000 per employee. That's what's in our budget.
Then let us do the comp study and we'll go through the analysis.
That.
Because I don't think you're going to see those results.
Well, then there needs to be an explanation as why that difference isn't showing up when it shows up in that other data. Because those people doing our study claim they're gonna go get that data to look at it because it's,
That's not the way they're
That's
gonna.
not the way
obtain
they do it.
data.
way, it just strikes me that something is way the hell off. That's why I was fussing about limiting our increases until we know why it appears to be so far off. Because I would just went to our budget 15 minutes before the meeting and looked at it, divided it by another employees, and it's 180,000 per employee. A lot of money per employee.
I,
What it is, 3.877 divided by 21, 180,000. So anyway, but like I say, when I came in, I wasn't for doing this, the levels requested. I thought the supervisor should be getting incrementally more because he obviously has more duty. Willing to go along with whatever you guys think is the right thing to do. I understand it a lot better now than I did.
spent the first third of my career borrowing jobs from my boss, whoever it was. And that's how I got to know my boss's job. After that first third, I was the one, the other end of that process. That's what you're doing here. I think it's the best possible way to get the best possible employees into every slot.
my goal is to have these employees who've spent their really good at being operators. And they get sheltered from some of the administrative sort of political bureaucratic roles.
Mhm.
And
As they learn that.
And I want to get them in a position, and they're probably not going to like this statement, where they can come here and talk about what they do and ask for your questions and explain something and say, here's what I want to do and why I want to do it. And you all get the opportunity to ask them questions because that's how they're going to learn. They've seen me do it a lot. And they need to do it a lot. The first time is scary as hell. And the next time it's less. And they learn and they develop their style and they develop their knowledge and experience to where they can stand here one day and explain to you or to the public why we're doing what we're doing and why it's important. And
That's not an art, that's a learned behavior.
and some of them will flourish and some of them will float up a little bit and say, ooh.
I think that it's important that you have the lowest level of your people feel a bit comfortable knowing that's what they need to do and know that that's how they need to react. And by doing that, they will step up as time goes on. And it'll be the same with this. These guys will do their other things. And the lower level operators aren't necessarily slacking. They just might be a little timid. They might lose a bit of that security blanket and they're going to take some more of that on. I've seen that happen in my industry.
I've told them all, I want to give them an opportunity. I want the district and the organization to give them an opportunity to learn and grow and flourish in their careers. I've also told them I'm not going to let them fail. So if they come in here and they completely just fail a speech, that's okay. I'll help you out and we'll learn, you know, and I'll help you get there. I did, you know.
If you decide you don't want to do that
you
anymore,
know-
that's okay too.
That's okay too. But I want them to have the opportunity and have the ability and have people around them that will say, we'll help you get somewhere if you want to. And if you don't, you're welcome to, because there's only 20 of us right now. Somebody's got to lift the shovel and lick the stamp and wrench the thing. So that's where I want to get with this organization and these people, is to say who can and will and want to fill these roles. And if we can't, then we need to go get the expertise because it's necessary for the district, then we do that. But
Everybody
first,
has to understand what's needed
Right.
and whether they make it.
Okay, with that, I think
Motion I'd like to make, I think, is we recommend to the full board, right? That these temporary positions and temporary salary increases until the class and comp study is done, approved by the board, be recommended to the full board.
together that presentation,
Comes my date. It's finished.
When
and approved
the
by
board says it's done, it's done.
So at the time that's done,
Second motion?
I have to continue to raise my banner of employees, you know?
I don't know that we need to have a second up. I'll second it.
well, we can do that and take it to the board and have a full board discussion and go from there.
So, Allison,
Yes.
on that study that I like referencing, the public pay, the only thing I found in there that was wrong from our 2021 data was the number of employees. They've got 28.
You guys are count as employees for compensation purposes.
They do what?
Your board member compensation, you're considered employees.
Employee of the district.
You get a W-2,
That makes our number even higher.
Don't pay CalPERS or anything. It's just simple tax salary.
It's 10,000 a year or something.
So that would, if you divided 28. by that-
28, you know, like I said, Lita was at 106. We were at 112 point something if you use 28. If you use 21, we're at 150 for that year. Now this year, the benefits by our budget, it's 180,000 per employee.
So we don't back out overtime, standby, anything like that when they ask for total compensation. Other people back out overtime, standby time, and only report base. Yes, because I know what the template looks like and I know how it can be misnomered. And I know what other districts pay because it's transparent and I know what they're recruiting for and we get applicants from those districts. And so we have conversations with them. So I know sort of what some of the anomalies are and how those are reported. And it's very easy to just take your total base salary, multiply it by 12 and plop that number in there and send it. Otherwise it's very time consuming to fill those out correctly. And so I know where the anomalies are in those. And so I can see where you get these very large differences.
I think that may be, but it also may be an assumption. But again, when you're,
we 7 board members are
150
the
versus-
lowest paid employees in the
it's,
organization.
you make about 2,500 a year. So 14,000, 15,000 a year, it's not, doesn't appreciably affect the average, but it does if you're divided by 28. It's 21. So big, but when I see a $44,000 difference per employee per hour, I can understand some of the things you're doing, but I think that explains it.
Let's do the study. Every employee, and we did this, some districts do it by number. And they give you an Excel spreadsheet when you do the study. And they say, here's the results of the study, here's the Excel spreadsheet. We don't do that. We take the Excel spreadsheet and turn it into a graph. And we say for the operator 3, here's the low for the range, here's the high for the range, here's the 50th percentile, here's the average, and here's where we fall out. So you can look at a verbal, as a visual graph and see where we're above 50, below 50, above percentage, and they're not over here on the highest paid in the list. You were here for the last one we did, and we're not. We're just not.
I don't know what we were at 19, but we certainly appear to be now. So
We know what people are paying. I can tell you the last two people that came here took a pay cut. And spent some time struggling with their family and their spouse, and came back to Allison and said, how do I clarify this? It was a very, very detailed conversation because it down to that point. Last two took pay cuts to come here from outside the organization, from this area. They came here because we're a good place to be, and I'm going to protect that.
So when we publish, like we approved a pay scale last year. We've got all the job titles, all the grades, all the steps, all those slots. Other districts not publish that same kind of a chart?
Maybe not in that format, but you are required to publish those. The law actually says that you must make those publicly available, and they're usually by resolution, so you might have to dice through like a resolution to find it. And you have to make the range publicly transparent when you recruit. So everybody knows what the starting point is and what the ceiling is. Because there's been some litigation that essentially you have to demonstrate what somebody's ability is to grow monetarily within that position. And every public position has a ceiling that essentially we can't go above the ceiling, whether somebody's been here for 40 years or been here for 5 years and came in with equal experience to somebody with 40.
So what I'm thinking about that is, there's a chart that we've developed. I forget what to call it. I read all the numbers. Each step is defined as 5% higher than the last, and each grade is 1%.
Correct.
So that grid, regardless of which mix of employees you have, how many years of experience, that grid compares to this grid. Ours is 50% higher.
Oh, it's not.
It's not.
It's not.
So that's what
I'm telling you, it's not.
that's what I'm going to go check.
Yeah.
I didn't look at their budgets and I didn't look at their grids, but those are published, right?
Correct.
And we just should have that published.
Correct. They'll be by some
So
sort of.
if I go do that and look at that and I find out, then all of a sudden you won't hear me talking about this anymore at the meetings. And you'll be ecstatic that I did it.
One of the things you have to take into account is a lot of positions, it's what does the person do?
No, because they're on that grid somewhere. I'm just comparing grid to grid.
The grid's the same. It's where do you place the person and what are
I
the,
could explain.
and why and what are the expectations for that person? You can call somebody a chief deputy in charge of a lot and all they're doing is answering the phone. And so you have to look at the MQs and you have to do this analysis and say, Rick here, person X here does the same thing, and here's how they align, and here's the difference in their salaries. And that's not in the resolution because a lot of people's grid, they don't have the person's name there. They just have the number. So then you get,
For a lot of things.
so
Well, one of the things I did that got, this was last year when I was interested in looking at this stuff. I went and looked at, you'd mentioned that there were a lot of openings at the various districts. So I went looking for them and I only found one and it was at Goleta. I don't know if that's why I keep bringing it up, but they were.
I think I sent you a person's name and I said,
Remember that, but
and I,
remember your note. But
and I sent you the person's name and I told you what they made here and I told you they'd make 27% somewhere else and they were qualified for that job.
Yeah.
And so
What fascinated me though, and this is part of why I got so wound up about doing this comparison, not only with other districts, but also with the private sector, is the one that I found on my own was for a lab tech, entry-level lab tech. Only requirement was a high school education and, other stuff, but, come to work for us as an entry.
Certification.
Certification as a lab tech. There was no wastewater certification required for those people. But what fascinated me about it is their range for that guy was this. Range for a lab tech was this. Remember right? Might have been Anyway, it was just slightly different by 10 or 12,000. But what bothered me about on the high end, both ranges were higher than my son, a graduating aerospace engineer, was making right out of college with a 4.0 GPA.
You know,
And I thought, this is a lab tech with a high school degree. And to me, it's just, so that's why my feeling is that,
we don't compare a public employee required to have an lab certificate that works for us as a lab tech and a nurse or a doctor or a
But the
teacher.
point is, when all you're asking for is a high school diploma to do this stuff. Then,
It's based on the job and the market.
well, I know that.
My son wanted to be
But it's also some location.
my son wanted to be a marine biologist more than anything in the world because he loved fish. And then he went and looked at the salaries and says, you know what? I'm going to become a civil engineer, make more, and make scuba diving my hobby because I like fish. Smart man.
Well, that's what I told my son. You can make more sanitary district here than you're doing what you're doing. Go in as a lab tech with a high school degree.
Well, with that, I think we can qualify this as item 5 for committee discussion. Do you have anything more, Mr. Palmer?
No, we're glad for a sunny day.
Yes, that's the good thing.
It's running heavy both sides of Foothill Road right
Yeah.
now.
We tested today.
Big numbers.
We'll get results back probably Friday.
Well, I know what I wanted to do. Kaiser stopped me and said that down on 33 and Barbara Street or whatever it is, he was smelling some distinct sewage odor. This has been the last storm, so I don't know if it's still going on at the time, but he texted it to my wife who's out of town, so I didn't get the message till days later, but
That's not a normal problem. We do find problems where catch basins and storm drains are full of leaves and turn to a stinky, rotting mess.
yeah,
That too.
And there's lots of them along there, yeah.
that may be what's going on, because that is where that drainage. ditch was.
Overflowing septic tanks will give you the same effect.
I sent Jeff a note, because when we hiked up Sulphur Mountain Road, my wife and I, after the last storm, there was a very distinct sewage smell where a creek was going under just above the Girl Scout camp. Jeff thought it might have been the seeps, but the seep was 250 feet up the road, and it didn't smell like this did. But
Don't have any,
a week later, and the creek was not running anymore, and the smell was gone. So,
that's why they call it Sulphur Mountain Road.
huh?
That's why they call it Sulphur Mountain Road.
No, I understand. I mean, I'm an oil guy. I know the oil smell, but this was sewage. But it struck me that maybe somewhere up on the hill, there was an old septic that was draining. There's nothing that we collect up there, so it wasn't anything obvious. Anyway, well, it's been fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to explain things to me. I apologize for me
Not at all.
taking so much time of
We
your
can
time,
all-
because
We can
I
all
think
learn
everybody
from
thought
this and
would
it's
last
good.
an hour, and I showed up, so.
During this meeting at 5:30.